Now, the rise of anti-Semitism together with the politicisation of the police force is increasingly an issue in the West. We've seen examples of it right here in Australia, but I would argue it is considerably worse in Europe, in the UK. Take a look at this anti-Israeli protest in Edinburgh, where police approach a Jewish man just standing there minding his own business, but they go across to him and advise him that it would be best if he hid his Star of David necklace because it could trigger the protesters.
If people will see your star, which I appreciate that you feel into it, they will just get very, very angry. Okay, so I'm just making you aware that then it might trigger the people, because obviously I understand you're sitting on the different sides of the fence. That's my only concern. Okay, that the star will set them off and they'll cause an argument. There's only 3 of us here. It might be difficult for us to manage the situation. Okay.
I don't plan to argue or engage with anyone.
No,
and it is my religion. I am Jewish.
Yeah.
Well, no, we wouldn't want to set off the peaceful protesters, would we? To discuss this and much more, I'm joined by GB News presenter Darren Grimes. Darren, is that Scotland in 2024 or 1930s Germany?
What have Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP done to Scotland, Rita? That's what I have to ask you, because I tell you what, if we actually looked across there today and someone was wearing a hijab or a burqa and they were told to take it off for fear that they may trigger a so-called peaceful protester, can you imagine, Rita, the outcry from that, the liberal protestation, the liberal indignation? It would be off the charts. But when it happens to a Jewish person, they are completely ignored, sidelined. Do you think the police would ever make such demands of any other religion? I certainly don't. And I think actually, as I say there, the political and media class would be screaming until blue in the face. There would be accusations of police being Islamophobic. There would be accusations of religious intolerance. But when it comes to the Star of David, must that be covered? Why can these people not be told that if they threaten somebody or approach them and they are violent in any way, that they will face the full threat of the law? This is appeasement to the mob, Rita. And I think our police officers need to recognise that they're not there to form a protection ring for these mobs. They're there to actually enforce the law, protect the public. That means protecting Jews. And they need a sharp reminder that the freedom of expression of religious identity applies to all faiths and not just one of them.
You are so right. It is mob rule. That's all it is. And in the tape, the police officer also talks about there's only 3 of us here, and he was worried that they wouldn't be able to protect this guy because of his Star of David if the mob saw it. Well, if this is such a easily triggered violent mob, then have more than 3 police officers there to protect the community. Why would you only have 3? It is astonishing. And you're so right. If it was the other way around, if, I don't know, if there was some white supremacy march or some anti-say Muslim march and someone was told to take off your hijab because it might trigger the protesters, the entire police hierarchy would have to step down in disgrace. There would be all sorts of reviews and investigations, and how could this culture be allowed to take hold? Now, going into the judiciary now, British Judge Tan Ikram, who decided not to punish 3 women who were displaying parachute images at a pro-Palestinian protest recently. He just gave them a slap on the wrist, is under fire because it's now been revealed, Darren, that he liked social media posts that were anti-Israel, one I think called Israel a terrorist state, and another one he liked that called for freeing of Palestine, presumably not free from Hamas. We've got the police and the judiciary who should both be above politics.
Absolutely, Rita. And I think you're absolutely right to highlight that we in Europe are perhaps a few years ahead of where Australia may ultimately end up. We saw, those scenes outside the Sydney Opera House that were, in my view, utterly disgusting. But I think when you consider what's happened here in Britain over the recent weeks, we've had an army veteran member of Parliament, Rita, who actually fought to save a copper's life after a terrorist attacked this police officer, and he's now had his home targeted by pro-Palestinian thugs. We had MPs in Jewish constituencies having their offices torched. We've seen Labour, of course, cement its position as the home of anti-Semitism here in Britain. So much for Sir Keir Starmer changing his party. And then today, of course, Rita, that Star of David incident. And now, as you rightly say, this judge who apparently accidentally liked a certain tweet. It just smacks of, I know, isn't that absurd? This is someone who's sitting pretty. He's got a CBE, an honour from His Majesty the King. He sits on a judicial appointments committee, but then he's gone and liked another LinkedIn post. And these posts are calling, as you rightly say, Israel a terrorist state and the chance for free Palestine. This isn't just a social media gaffe, right? This is like finding out that your vegan mate has been sneaking bacon butties into his packed lunchbox. But we've got to recognise women who were just waved off after broadcasting these images of paragliders at protests. These weren't just paragliders, right? They were a nod to a really horrific part of the Hamas invasion of Israel on October 7th. 1,200 Israelis. Do these people have no humanity? Do they not look?
We know what the paragliders mean. I mean, we saw the Chicago branch of BLM post that image as well, and that caused some controversy. But the paragliders is glorifying those bloodthirsty terrorists who flew into a music festival and raped, tortured and murdered scores of young people who were there to enjoy the music. I mean, that's what they are celebrating. That it is not. It's not even trying to be artful about it. It is being very blatantly saying by any means, including rape, torture and murder. Now let's move on to this is another case of going woke and going broke, Darren. The Body Shop, the British cosmetic company, it's been plunged into administration and its stores in the UK are at risk of closing. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I don't know, viewers may well be aware because I remember doing it on Sky News Australia at the time, Rita, but the Body Shop attacked J.K. Rowling, right? They told her that actually she should read some book by some trans activist and enjoy one of their vegan bath bombs to actually relax as she reads this book and educates herself, those watchwords of the moment. But clearly these clowns, Rita, have focused on whackery and wokery over sales and customer service. And actually, I think J.K. Rowling will continue to have the last laugh, not just on the Body Shop, but every other woke organisation that has attacked her for standing up for women's rights and actually single-sex spaces and the sanctity of those spaces themselves. I actually think this goes to show that the commercial curse of being woke, a woke joke, it struck again. We saw this with Bud Light, Rita. We saw this with so many other of woke corporates that are focused on the priorities, and it comes back to royally bite them on the behind.
Oh, you're so right. And you know what? They used to be a little bit in the activist space years ago, but it related to their products. So their big thing was, we don't test on animals, and they're a cosmetic company. So you're like, okay, if I care about that, that is a big plus. And I think that was great. But then they're starting to go after J.K. Rowling and lecture women about accepting male bodies into female spaces and getting into all sorts of really divisive, ugly, fringe issues that have got nothing to do with the cosmetic industries. And look where they are now. Now, to an issue that impacts everybody in the UK. UK businesses are suffering from power price pain, and that means that their prices are going to go up. 4 out of 5 say that high energy bills will force them to raise prices for customers over the next 2 years. And we've already got, Darren, UK families struggling to pay their bills. Around 6 million households are in what's called energy poverty. all self-inflicted pain, Darren.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. This is the madness of following net zero, the net zero orthodoxy of being more Greta than Glasgow. You know, this is the insanity of it. We've got sky high inflation, and then the economists are saying to us, Rita, well, this is exactly the problem of approaching these so-called reliable renewables, which are anything but. You know, I could stand outside and hope that the wind is going to blow so I can power my home, Rita. But, you know, you can't guarantee, you can't power a gas boiler with that. You know, you can't heat your home. We had elderly people in this country over recent years who have literally died from pneumonia because they are too cold to put the heating on in a country that, guess what, gets really rather cold. We've just seen British Steel close its doors in Wales, where Welsh working class families are saying, we don't know what we're going to do. And that's because energy is so prohibitively expensive. And these energy intensive industries, which are national key security battlegrounds that we're going to need in an increasingly volatile world, where actually they're saying we can't afford to operate in Britain anymore. And then you compare us with other European nations. France hasn't pursued this net zero dogma as insanely as we have. They actually went hell for leather on nuclear energy. We shunned that. Our politicians said no to that. We need wind, we need solar. Well, Britain is a country that the sun doesn't shine in very often. And when the wind blows, well, as I say, you can't heat a home or power a gas boiler with that stuff. We're going to need oil and gas for many, many years to come. This is the utter insanity of this pursuit. As I say, it's placing Greta and activist politics above the British people. And that's where the government has gone totally wrong. And it makes me utterly mad, Rita.
Darren, you are so right. It is weakening the country. It is self-inflicted harm. And sadly, the British public have no choice because Labor is even more hell-bent on net zero than the Tories who've inflicted this pain on the country. Darren Grimes, always a pleasure. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks, Rita.